Hey folks, it's Marvin Cash, the host of The Articulate Fly. I can't believe that we're already at the end of 2019. This is our last interview of the year, and I'm really fortunate to have been able to spend some time with Mike Schultz, or as most people call him, Schultzy, of Schultz Outfitters. We talked about how he got into the smallie game, his thoughts on targeting trophy bass, and all things Schultz Outfitters. I hope you enjoy it. Before we move on to the interview, though, a couple housekeeping items. It would be great if you could give us a review and a rating in the podcatcher of your choice, or even better, check out our mobile apps. We have an app for iOS and Android devices. All you have to do is go to the app store of your choice and search The Articulate Fly. It's free, and it's the best way to stay in touch with what we're doing at The Articulate Fly. And folks, however you celebrate this season, I wish you a happy and safe holiday season. So Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and of course, a happy and prosperous New Year's to all of you. Now, on to our interview. Well, welcome to The Articulate Fly, Schultz. I'm glad to have you on.
Oh, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun, and we have a tradition at The Articulate Fly. I have to always ask all of my guests to share their earliest fishing memory.
Well, I thought about that, and I think, really it was just going to the fishing grounds. I remember as a kid, being in a boat and being on lakes and cruising around and looking off those weed beds and seeing pike and perch and small bass and whatnot while Dad was running the motor and just kind of putzing. Those are some of the first that I can, vividly remember. I remember seeing my first pike and seeing my first perch and all that stuff. And then, just the basics, fishing around docks and catching small largemouth and doing the whole spring bluegill on the beds thing. Those are probably my earliest memories shared with both my father and my grandfather.
Yeah, it sounds pretty similar to how I grew up. I assume you started out fishing gear and then moved on to fly fishing later?
Correct. Yeah, definitely. The early days were the old spin cast and, the old $20 Berkeley cherrywood, pistol grip spin caster. And then eventually, Dad let me use the Cardinals and all the fancy, Zebcos of those days, and started using spinning rods and eventually graduated to bait casters and then fly fishing.
Yeah. When did you move to the dark side of fly fishing?
That was teenage years. Definitely, was introduced the way that a lot of kids and, early anglers are getting into it in Michigan, getting introduced to that is through the migratory fish. So, we have king salmon runs, cohos, and steelhead, and that was kind of my first introduction. That was in the mid-'90s. When I was playing hockey, I had a family that was into fishing, and one of my buddies in the team, his dad took us salmon fishing, and in the spring he took us steelhead fishing, and that kind of got it rolling. And then around that time I tried to make my first fly cast, and then I would say I really got geeked out on it once I had the ability to drive and found smallmouth bass in the rivers where I grew up, and the rest is history. After that it was fully infected.
Yeah, it happens. Who were some of the folks that mentored you on your fly fishing journey to help you get to where you are today?
Well, when I think of like a mentor, I really, outside of my parents and, in life and, hockey coaches and whatnot, I really didn't have a fly fishing mentor that really kind of took me under their wing and showed me the ropes, so to speak. All that stuff went down pre-internet, so I didn't have the ability just to go online and look at things and look at videos and whatnot. That wasn't there, but I definitely gravitated towards the closest fly shop to my parents' house, which was called Buter's Outdoors, and John Buter was the owner, and he definitely was threw some wood on the fire and stoked it up for me, and that kind of got me interested in fly fishing. And I remember the OLN television, watching that in high school and seeing Andy Mill and Bobby Knight and all those shows, and whether it was trout fishing or saltwater fishing, that kind of was like, whoa, this is sweet. And John was the local fly shop guy, and he was the guy that I eventually just hung out there so much, and just started doing the things that you did around the house as a kid, taking out the trash and wiping down the counters and straightening up, and eventually took notice and I think my first several, ways that I was compensated was through product, and just hung out so much that eventually, I was able to secure a, low level position at the shop and work my way up from there. But, John was kind of the guy that was the local guy that kind of got it all started. But unfortunately, I didn't get to spend a ton of years with him, but still a friend to this day. And, I definitely credit him for getting it rolling.
Very cool. And when did you get the Flytine Bug?
Well, that was before I fly fished. So, before I even threw a rod, I was always growing up. My mom would always say that I was the hunter and my brother was the fisherman. And, for Christmas, I'd get things camouflage and, shotgun and a bow and all that kind of stuff when you're a kid growing up. And my brother would get the fishing stuff. And my father's sister purchased a cheap fly tying vise. Your basic stuff. I think my brother was like 8, 9 at the time, maybe he'll like this. He likes fishing. And it just sat there and, barely held hooks. It was one of those, $20, $30 starter kits that came with all the crappy feathers and terrible tools. And eventually I picked that up and started messing around with it, tinkering with it. And I think around 98, 99, somewhere around there, late 90s, Cabela's, the world's foremost, opens up here in Michigan. And I remember going there the first day that it was open. It was so busy. They were running golf carts, in the parking lot and run you up to the thing. And I ended up picking up some fly tying materials there to go with that vise. And, that kind of got it rolling. I quickly found out that wasn't going to be the end all be all vise, and, saved my pennies and went to the local fly shop, which was Buter's. And I think I got my first Renzetti Traveler around 99. And still have that vise today.
Yeah.
But that's kind of how I got it rolling.
Do you remember the first fly you tied on that vise?
I think it came with like some, instructions for some old school wet flies, and it's like, here, tie a scarlet ibis for your first fly. I don't know what it was, but, some married wing thing that I hacked together and, probably caught a bluegill on it at some point. But that was probably it. And then eventually, woolly buggers and woolly bugger variants and, what later became just the basic red-eyed leech, tying that silly thing up with dumbbell eyes that I hand painted and wrapping rabbit around a hook and going out and catching smallmouth.
Got it. And, I know your patterns today are made by Fulling Mill and Orvis carries them. I was wondering if you could share with us kind of your design philosophy behind your flies.
Yeah, well, flies, it starts with a problem, and, you're building something that's purpose built. So, that's kind of where I started with it. I think, there's a lot of amazing flies on the market today that you can go get that are mass produced. But I think no matter what, you're eventually going to come to a point as a fly angler that you're going to quickly realize that you're not going to be able to get everything you need out of the bins. So, I'm tying flies that work for my water. Originally, it's like getting started, you want to go out and have a fly that just catches fish, and you're fishing for smallmouth bass, you're fishing dumbbell-eyed flies, whether it's a leech or a sculpin or a crayfish, and you eventually gravitate towards topwater flies, fishing poppers and that kind of stuff. But a lot of the stuff that I think that, I have contributed, I guess, to fly tying is kind of that mid-level stuff, the stuff that swims. So like the swinging D type platform, that type of fly is built for our rivers. If you ever have the opportunity to see any of the photos that are taken from drones on the water that we fish a lot, it's really woody, and the fish sometimes are right in that wood. So fishing a fly that sinks at a rapid rate or doesn't have the ability to hang and suspend is going to quickly get hung up, and you're going to lose flies and lose fish and blah, 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 blah. So, like those type of swim flies, like Blaine's brought to the table, and the swinging D and stuff, that's all just, we had a problem. We had to figure out ways to fish that type water. And, the flies that I fish and tie, and I guess you could say carry my name through those companies, are built for our waters. Having said that, you can get a template of those flies, whether it's, your basic leeches or sculpins or whatever, or even swinging D's, but eventually you're going to have to tie your own because they're only going to come in one weight and one size and one or two or three color schemes. So, being able to tie is, it's hard to take a fly angler serious if they say they don't tie flies.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And were you self-taught on the tying front, kind of like you were on the fly tying front, or did you have people that influenced your development as a tyer?
Well, I got started in, the late 90s. So, modern streamers for trophy trout came out, I think in 98 or 99. And that local fly shop that I eventually got a job at, they would bring in tires, well-known tires. So I remember going to Gallup's event when he was there. So he kind of caught my eye early, and then the natural progression from Gallup to, Ross Madden, who worked for Kelly and, created the Circus Peanut and pretty much the template that most of Kelly's flies are built off of. I found him through the Troutsman and, again, pre-Instagram, pre-Facebook. His friends were buddies with Mark Sadati over on the East Coast. So I remember the first time Mark came out to Michigan, and I got to meet him and see his crazy designs and keeling techniques and the use of, non-conventional fly tying materials in a lot of his flies. You got to tip your hat to guys like Larry Dahlberg. I remember as a kid watching In Fisherman and seeing Larry being the fly guy on there. And, the shape of his Dahlberg diver head influenced the swinging D head. And, I get to work alongside Greg Senio on a regular basis. He works for me, 3-4 days a week. And then, of course, Blaine. I mean, I probably met Blaine about 8-10 years ago now. He's influenced so many. And I've just been fortunate in my travels and my location here in the upper Midwest, being from Michigan, to be exposed to some of these, great, not only fly tyers, but guys that are true innovators, not just taking stuff that's been done before and using new materials on it, guys that actually pave the way and do things their way. And, it's been lucky over the years, got to travel a lot and meet these guys and hang out with them and, call all those guys friends and just totally influence the way that I sit down at the device and approach things with just bits of information that I've gathered from them over the years.
That's really neat. When did you become obsessed with catching smallmouth?
Well, like I said, I started the salmon steelhead thing and, quickly realized, what am I going to do with, how am I going to keep this rolling? Those fish aren't around, year round, so to speak. So, I always grew up, I've lived in the same watershed my whole life, which is totally crazy. I went to school right by the shop, and I live within the Huron River watershed. So we do have steelhead at the lower ends of the river, but the river has smallmouth bass in it, right? So, what do you do when you're young and you don't have any money and you got a crappy car and you can't just drive 4 hours and go fishing for salmon, steelhead, and trout all the time? You got to kind of make do. And my personality isn't such that I can just go, I'm going to go fishing, that one time this month and go up north for a few days. I got to have it all the time. So I quickly gravitated to the closest moving water that I could find, which, fast forward many years and I'm fishing and learning on the same water, like the same piece of water that the shop is on. So, yeah, buddy. Get you one of those. Here you go. Here's a feather. We're sitting at the Flytine. Dylan is here. He's in the room. He's our buddy.
He's our special guest.
He's our special guest. Say hi, Dylan. Okay. Go watch the movie. I'll be right back. Okay. See you in a few minutes. Sorry about that.
Oh, not a problem at all.
So where were we? Oh, so smallmouth. So we'll rewind a little bit. So I quickly gravitated towards the closest moving water that I could find, and that happens to be the Huron River. And fast forward a few years, and poof, I got a fly shop right on that stretch of river, and I vividly remember sitting on the island that's right outside the window of the shop and breaking my first fly rod and learning the basics out there. And that stretch of river still to this day has a good number of fish. There isn't a lot of large fish, But what that gave me the opportunity to do was have immediate success, and go out and get the basics down, from stripping the fly to setting the hook. In those early years, you're always putting the line on the reel, just little things that, you're learning the basics. So the Huron River is kind of where I started with smallmouth, and where I still find myself today. I live, a quarter mile away from it. And, that kind of got me rolling, and that's kind of the centerpiece of our operation, is the river that I learned on. And then we expanded out from there.
That's neat. How long did it take you to feel like you had smallies dialed in?
Yeah, I still don't, but a long time. Yeah. It's, you go, through a lot of different phases with it, and trial and error, and trying different things, and, reading books and articles and all that stuff. And, the early years, like even when I was working at the first fly shop, second fly shop, third fly shop, there really wasn't a lot of stuff, for bass fishing, when it came to equipment. So, lines and flies and that kind of stuff. So, you're kind of making do with what you could find, Harry Murray's book, and, some of the stuff that Clouser was doing back then, and whatnot, and kind of building off that. But, it's a process. But I felt I had a fairly solid foundation, when I opened the shop, which was in 2011. I had a good following of clients that would fish with me on a yearly basis, and, knew enough to be dangerous. But over the last 8 years, it's really taken off, and, I couldn't have done it without the help of, our team, and that's the biggest thing. Having a crew of anglers who, really buy into the system and stick to the program, and share knowledge and real-time information is what really, took it, made it take off and go to the next level. So, with that, we had our seasons change in Michigan. So we had a season that went from the last Saturday in May to December 31st. And then a few years later, it went from the last Saturday in April to December 31st. And then 6 years later, it went to year round. So it really helped us dial in the early season stuff when the water's a lot colder. And then eventually that early season success and what we were learning there gave us confidence to push it later into the season. So, you're just building on it. Everything, there's so many programs and different things within, we call it seasons within a season, and you just got to break it down and focus on that stuff. So what we were able to do is we were able to identify those things, kind of come up with a hit list, and kind of work our way through it, and together sharing knowledge and having guys that could row well and understood the angles of approach and stuff, which I'm sure we'll get into, really helped take it off.
Yeah, and I think most anglers really don't appreciate the value of having that network of guides that are fishing, the same days on different watersheds, to be able to compare notes, and how quickly that helps, manage the pressure, but also to just learn about the species and learn about the watershed.
Definitely. No, and getting, it's fishing. So getting real information that's truthful and whatnot is hard to do. So if you can build that crew, that's gonna, together you're better.
Yeah, got it. And, I know, for example, there are differences among different species of largemouth depending on where you are in the United States. Are there any things that are unique about upper Midwest smallmouth bass?
Well, I'd say, I spend most of my time, like pretty much all my time, fishing Michigan, a little bit in Wisconsin, and then I've dabbled a little bit over in Minnesota. So, we're in southern Michigan. Where we're located, and there's some tremendous fisheries here. There's amazing fisheries in the Upper Peninsula, upper Wisconsin, Minnesota. There's so much cool stuff to do, and there's definitely a difference amongst those watersheds, with what we're dealing with down here. I would say, our fish don't migrate as much as say those fish further north. that's one thing. But I would say, the biggest thing, if you compare it to the rest of the country and down south, is what we're finding is our fish will still continue to, they're catchable even in really cold water. So yesterday it was 37, and, we're hooking fish that are fighting way harder than spring fish, and they're just fat. So I think our fish, what we're finding up here is, they're not migrating as much as you'd see like up where my buddy Willen guides or Dahlberg's at up in Minnesota. These fish are staying put, so you have the ability to fish to those fish until the rivers completely ice up, and they're going to be in a similar area to where they're going to be in the spring. So our fish are hardy, like I think people talk about, down south saying like, oh, they really shut down. I think, and I've never been down there. I don't know firsthand, but I'm thinking those fish may move a little bit. I think, there's not a lot of information out there on it. So unless you're willing to go out and put the time in, they're going to be hard to catch in the colder weather, in the colder water, I should say. But yeah, fish are just hardy, man. The upper Midwest fish are tough. They're native, they're wild, and they're tough to beat.
Yeah, I would imagine too, kind of in the South, that, people have other species to fish for during that time, so they don't really feel terribly tempted to figure the smallmouth in the winter game out because they want to go fish for muskie or go do something else.
Yeah, exactly. No doubt. There's variety is the spice of life.
So I know you specialize in targeting trophy smallmouth, and I was curious about because my experience fishing for smallmouth has been that if they're eating, the small ones are just fearless. They'll chase a big streamer. Mm-hmm. So how do you change your approach to fishing for them so that you kind of increase the percentage of trophy fish that you're putting in the boat versus catching a bunch of dinkers and you get 2 or 3 nice fish?
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I mean, everything changes. Everything changes. So from your preparation to your focus to your scouting, people usually associate that with hunting, but that's something I associate with fishing too. Understanding the CFS, cubic feet per second, the water volume and how it affects said river. Understanding water temps, seasonal movements of your fish, everything down to the choice of equipment. So it's just like the guy that is super nerdy and geeked out on hunting that one giant whitetail with his bow. It's the same thing when it comes to trophy bass fishing. If you're, I don't like to call it that, but it is what it is. We're going out, we're trying to catch the biggest, most mature, oldest fish in the system. That's what I enjoy doing. Don't get me wrong. I'll go down the river and catch a bunch of fish with my kids and have a good time. And there are clients that like to do that. But my main focus, if you're coming to fish with me, is, most guys are going to come here, anglers are going to come here to catch the biggest fish. So I may not be choosing my water, on numbers. I'm choosing it on size. And, a lot of the early season big fish hunting stuff I prefer to do, and a lot of people do as a single angler, which allows me to position the boat and such that, a back guy would a lot of times be shut out of a casting angle. So, the whole thing changes how you do it, how you approach them on the river, what river you choose, do the light levels that day or flows or whatever. I mean, it's a totally different program than just going out and catching. You don't go out on our waters and put a high number of fish over 20 inches in the boat, just going down the river and slapping flies around and playing a numbers game. It just doesn't happen.
No, it makes a lot of sense. How has that shift to targeting trophy smallmouth affected your fly design?
Every river, every situation has its own set of flies. So over the years, we developed a set of flies for each season, each specific program, even down to flies for specific rivers or even specific sections of rivers. We guide 6 different rivers in southern Michigan. And, each one of them is unique in its own right. And, some of them are high numbers of fish, lower numbers of, what we would consider a trophy fish, say 20 inches or better. And, some of them are low density, but the opportunity of a really large fish is there. So, different forage. Some rivers have a lot of bait fish. Other rivers have a lot of frogs. So, how you're going to target that fish is the intimate knowledge of what that fish is eating. Now, I don't get totally nerdy about it to where I'm, going trout style and matching it that close. But, knowing what they're eating at a given time is fairly important. And, that type of information is only gained by time on the water. Fly design, fly choice for that given day is all just pretty much in my head, and it's all from past, experience of how I'm going to approach it.
No, it makes a lot of sense. Do you mind sharing your favorite patterns for smallmouth?
Yeah. I mean, if it was me fishing, I'd be fishing, hair frogs. I really enjoy fishing like Dahlberg style head hair frogs, swimming frogs, or swim flies. So I'm all about seeing the fish react to the fly and ultimately eat it. I think that is one of the coolest aspect or, traits of a smallmouth bass is just, how they'll pursue the fly. They'll eat the fly. It's a very visual thing. Being able to, if I can't see them eat it, it's not as fun. So, really enjoy that part of the game. So fishing flies, people take note of, what I'm fishing. If they're looking at Instagram or whatever and seeing the flies in the fish's mouth, you see a lot of light colored flies, especially when it comes to when I'm personally fishing. So I like, white flies is the base, for most of my patterns, when it comes to swim flies and stuff that I enjoy fishing. So, seeing the eat is huge. And, those swim flies will give you that. And then of course, hair frogs, the way that a smallmouth bass absolutely annihilates a hair frog is something to be seen, and something that is highly addicting. And I really like those two flies. And then I guess the other thing that I would throw in there would be one program that we've put a lot of time into, myself and my head guide at the shop, James Hughes, is terrestrial fishing. And we're talking like totally low clear water, sight fishing, not making a cast unless you see a fish, sight fishing. So I really enjoy that, fishing those terrestrials and coming up with cool little ways to tie them and seeing the fish eat the fly and reject the fly and everything that they do when they're in that super low clear water environment. I'd say those are my three best favorite ways to target them right now: is hair frogs, swim flies, and then doing the super finesse, light tippet, 6-weight terrestrial game.
Very neat. And you mentioned this earlier in the interview, talking about the importance of angle of approach and how important it was to have someone that can row a boat. What do you mean by that?
Well, if you fish with myself or one of our guides, you'll quickly see that our rivers are fairly small. CFS wise, summertime, they could be running as low as 100. In the spring, they might get up to, fishable levels around 2,000. So, relatively shallow by most standards. Some of them get crystal clear. So when you're fishing these rivers, your fly more times than not, is not tracking at a great distance. You're not just hucking a fly out, as far as you can cast it and retrieving it. The river bottom is little buckets and dips, and some sections we could define as holes, but usually a fish that's laid up in a hole isn't going to be a fish that's going to be necessarily eating aggressively. So having someone on the sticks that's a really good rower, and then religiously keeping the fly out front of the boat. So just general terms, roughly a 45-degree angle off the left or the right side of the boat, fishing downstream. Guide boat, the oarsman is positioning the boat in a fashion that's going to allow you to, swim the fly or fish a dredge fly or fish a frog on that angle. And other reasons, it's stealthy. You're not casting the fly line off over the fish. You're casting on a 45 down. The way that a smallmouth bass eats the fly is going to be, you're going to get a much better hookup as the fish comes up, eats the fly, and turns on it. Once the fish is hooked, once the fish eats, more times than not, that fish is going to go downstream, or our fish usually will go away from the bank and come out front of the boat. So you're never going to have slack. So if you're off the side of the boat and you set the hook and the fish comes at you or goes to the middle, it's going to create slack, and you're going to be doing the full John Travolta hook set with the Saturday Night Fever strip, where you just got the rod over your head going crazy. Where the fish is, the fish is out front, it eats the fly, it comes across, everything's tight. You're getting a positive hook set. Oarsman's able to maybe hit the oars a couple times to make sure that hook is buried in that fish, and then it's on. So, doesn't matter if you're, like I said, if you're fishing terrestrials or you're fishing swinging D's, where the head of that fly is designed to come in on that angle to give you the ultimate, side to side wounded bait fish swim. Same thing with a lot of the Blaine's changer flies, is they're going to fish really well that way. In colder water, you're not necessarily bringing the fly back to the boat as you're walking that fly back, or you're dancing that fly back in front of that log jam. If you're fishing on that 45-degree angle between, yourself and the oarsman is able to control that fly and keep it moving on tension and suspending in the zone versus swinging way out or quickly. Less water or less line on the water, you're in more control of the fly. So if it's out on a 45, you're not going to have that big belly in the line ripping it out, and you're keeping it in the zone. When the water is really high in the spring, you're going to have log jams that are creating, seams and bubble lines coming off these jams. And what you'll find is those fish will be way back in the cold, dead water. We call it couch water. And eventually, as the water temps warm, they're going to move their way to that seam. And you're able to keep that fly on a 45-degree angle and keep it in the zone or walk it across. It's just a better mousetrap for the smallmouth bass and the way they eat. Sure, you'll be able to get them to eat off the side of the boat, casting upstream and bringing it down, but the hook set and your hookup ratio is going to decrease the further you start working your way off to the side of the boat or upstream. So it's just the way they eat. Different style mouth. It's not a brown trout. They're not a grabber. They're an inhaler.
Got it. And is that type of presentation issue kind of the most common mistake you think anglers make fishing for smallmouth, or is there something else that's you see more often?
I see that. I definitely see that. We don't see a lot of boats on our rivers, other people fishing. Just doesn't happen. But when I do, I see I see the wrong angles a lot. Fishing too fast. The person on the oars makes or breaks the day. Right. So if your buddy's lazy on the oars and you're just floating around and moving too fast, good luck. It's just not going to happen. So, it doesn't matter if you're fishing for trout, fishing for muskie, fishing for smallmouth. It's a team effort. And, I think the speed in which the boat is moving, the choice of water, with our fish on our rivers, with the exception to a few of the higher number, higher density rivers when it comes to fish population, 99% of the fish are in 1% of the water. So finding that 1% and fishing it effectively is huge. Guys use too light of gear. If like I use 7 and 8 weights pretty much all the time. Maybe it dropped down to a 6 weight for that terrestrial game, but when we first started doing this, see a lot of guys just using their trout gear to go out and try to do this and wonder why they're not catching, big fish and whatnot. So, you just gotta, it's a totally different animal, and you got to think of a bass as a bass, not a bass as a trout. And if you really want to do it and get the job done, everyone's got to be on board.
No, it makes a lot of sense. That's why I almost always hire guides when I fish from drift boats, because generally the buddy thing doesn't always work out terribly well.
Nope, I agree. Can't row, you can't go.
Yeah, exactly. It's and I've had some of my worst arguments on the water about that particular issue. So just easier to hire a professional. You've spent your entire adult life around fly shops and guiding. What drew you into the fly fishing life?
Well, for me personally, like from an early age, I've always had that kind of entrepreneurial spirit. When I was a young kid, I'd make things and sell them at school and flip things and trade and just hustling whatever I was doing. Whatever it took to make a little bit of extra money and get that thing that I wanted, I was always doing that. And I like to do things my way. So, I remember being a little kid, into sports cards, and I'd always tell the guy at the card shop that, I'm going to own a card shop when I get older. And then it was, skateboarding and all the things you did as a kid. I want to own a skate shop, blah, blah, blah. So kind of always knew that I was going to go into business of some sort. I always wanted to just kind of do things my way and be my own boss, so to speak. So, I just got into the fishing and got infected with it. And when I first started around here in Southeast Michigan, Metro Detroit, roughly, there was a lot of different stores, and you could go get high-end gear at, let's just say, 10 or more stores. It was kind of coming off the movie era, mid-90s, late 90s. So there was a lot of shops around, and I worked for a few of them, and I always just thought, man, I had all these great, what I thought were great ideas at the time, and just always wanted to do it. And I look around and you'd see those shops, and it was all second careers, corporate refugees, owners with not a lot. The gas tank was already half empty, and there was really no extra drive to go above and beyond the norm. So I always thought that, I could do it better. I had the confidence to do it better, and started out with guiding, and took it from guiding to taking my clients that I guided on destination travel trips, and then eventually opened the shop. So it was definitely a process. Nothing came quick. And pushing 20 years in the industry, and nothing happens fast in fly fishing, that's for sure.
Yeah. What was the specific trigger that made you make the jump from, working and guiding for a shop to opening Schultz Outfitters?
I just, a future, I just knew that, there's obviously not a ton of money in the fishing industry. So, I could row a boat, and do that for the rest of my life, and, be a little banged up, and, the guide life is fun when you're young, but I definitely couldn't do it, for a full career. So I kind of knew that was working against me, and, I wanted to have, a wife and a family, and, just kind of looked at it as, I think good at this, and I got the confidence to grow it, and, I'll assemble a team, and, kind of planned it that way. So yeah, it was a long process, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, as they say, but, it all worked out. It's growing. It continues to grow. We got a great squad, and, keep grinding.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because you've got a really successful store, and so many people struggle in the fly shop game. What do you think you need to be successful as a shop owner?
Being original, just being original. Blazing your own trail. All the cliches. The golden rule, man. I mean, you just got to treat other people like you want to be treated, and do cool stuff. Build a team. I think there's a lot of turnover in shops with employees. We've been able to hang on to all the good ones, and the guys bought into the system, and it's a team over an eye type atmosphere always. And it starts at the top and goes all the way down to the new guys. And how we hire and the type of people that we hire. So I think there's it's a small piece of the pie, and I don't think I would have the guts to go into an established region and buy or open a fly shop. It's a lot of areas are saturated. So like I said, the piece of the pie is only so big. So I'm fortunate to grow up in this area I looked at what other shops were doing when I was younger, and, everybody was pushing the trout game. And it seemed to me, at a young age that it's like, they're trying to sell trout stuff to people that are going to the Osable or the Manistee or the Pure Marquette. And there's plenty of shops up there that know the river's way better than they do. And it just, right in our backyard, we had awesome smallmouth fishing. We had pike, we got carp, we got Lake St. Clair, we got the Lower Detroit River. There's so much cool stuff to do around here. And, I was just able to kind of harness that and see an opportunity and put in the time and, eventually get a crew, which we talked about, and we were able to continue to build it. And, it's still growing every year, and just having a great time doing it and just loving what you do, man. It's all about loving what you do and having a good time. And like I say, you're not gonna work a day in your life if you love what you do. And I definitely work, but the outcome is definitely worth the effort. And that's just it, man. Just keep grinding and doing cool stuff and innovating and listening to people and seeing what works and what doesn't work, and taking shots, taking chances. That's it. Taking chances.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because from talking to you, it sounds that a lot of your sports background growing up taught you a lot about team sports and leadership too. It sounds like that's a huge part of, what you've been able to channel to make Schultz Outfitters so successful.
Definitely. No, the team environment and, I couldn't do it without those guys, just my name on the door, but it's all of us pitching in to make it all happen.
Yeah. And for folks that haven't had a chance to visit the shop, what would a customer should they expect when they walk in the doors of Schultz Outfitters?
Friendly environment, low pressure sales. I always tell customers, like, we make suggestions, we make recommendations. If you want to take advantage of it and buy, that's your call. Just rock solid people that work for us, super knowledgeable. If the guy, that's working with you doesn't know, he'll quickly find someone within the building that does know. They're not, you're not going to get any BS from these guys. They're going to shoot you straight. Again, that's a hiring process, and finding the right people and training them properly. But, you're always going to walk out with something in our shop. It might not be products, but, I always tell the guys, everyone walks out with confidence when they leave here. So, you don't always have to ask the right questions, but feel free to ask questions. Our staff, kind of has, like I said, everyone knows what's up, but if they don't, they'll go find the answer for you. And, I always joke, it's like, we'll give you everything except our car shuttle drivers' numbers and where we're putting in and taking out on that given day. We're going to give you the right line, the right leader, the right flies. We're going to tell you exactly how to fish it, what to look for. So I think that's something, in the old school fly shop, you'd had to buy that. You know what I'm saying? You had to buy that. And, we don't really play that game. We give you the information, set you up for success. Confidence is always free.
Yeah, no, that's a really important point because, to your point, I think, not only in the old system you had to buy it, but there were gradations of buying it too, right? It's just like creeping disclosure based upon how much money you spent in the shop. Right. And I think that's I think, that's been a huge impediment to growing our sport. So I think it's really great that you have.
I agree.
Yeah. And I think it's great that you have a different approach because, to your point, like I can tell you everything except where I'm putting my boat in today and the rest is up to you, right? And if you don't want to put the time in, that's just how it's going to be.
No doubt. And that's one of the the things that I think is definitely being lost with fly fishing is, like just the way the society is right now with that, everything is immediate, right? And it's like, that is the journey of fly fishing. Like you have to go out, you have to put in the time. That is where, if it's just catching the fish, then go to a trout pond and and feed them a pellet fly, but you want to go out and discover, you want to learn, that's a great sport for that type of stuff. And there's nothing better than that. That's going out and actually earning that fish that you put the time in to earn.
Yeah. And at least for me, I know that's the greatest challenge because I don't get to fish as much as I like to. So I get to fish about 20 to 25 days a year. And I'm always struggling and asking questions about, like, with that finite amount of fishing time, how do you maximize your performance?
Exactly. No doubt.
So, but I know you guide for things other than smallmouth. Can you tell us a little bit about the guide service at the shop for the other species? And then I also know that you partner with other folks that are nearby for like steelhead, and also you do some destination travel as well.
Yeah, definitely. So, the guide service has been around longer than the shop. The shop opened in 2012, and the guide service actually started guiding, got my first guide license in Michigan in 2003. So the guiding has been around longer. I guided through the shops that I worked at back in the day. And, God bless those first few years of clients. They definitely took a risk going out with me. Obviously, price of trips back then were pretty low, but, it gave me the ability to get out there and learn and kind of cut my teeth and start from scratch. Again, but really didn't have any help with that. Just kind of went out and saw a blank slate and started working it. So, guide service has definitely, expanded a lot since 2003. We're running 5 guides during peak season and on 6 different rivers. And the primary focus is smallmouth bass. So most people come to fish with us for smallmouth. There are opportunities to go carp fishing. We have some really cool carp programs, sight fishing stuff to fishing mulberries. There's a lot of opportunity for that, especially, close to the shop on the Huron River. There's a lot of impoundments and different features to that river that makes it really good for carp. Once in a great while, we'll have people that want to go out and pike fish. Not going to lie, a big pike for us is 3 feet. It's not like you're going to go catch some monster pike, but they are there. And sometimes a year, they're highly predictable where they're going to be. And definitely a species you could target, but not something that we push too often. And then steelhead fishing. So we're hooked up with Steelhead Alley Outfitters out of Ohio. Greg Senio started that operation many years ago. So we'll send customers down to Steelhead Alley to fish with SAO. We'll send guys up to the Pier Marquette to fish with our head guide, James Hughes, who's mostly a smallmouth guy, but he does the steelhead in the fall, as well as Tommy Lynch. Both of them are up on the PM and work in that western side of the state. So, yeah, there's definitely options, but around us, 6 rivers, anywhere from 10-foot steps out the door of the shop to an hour away, would be the longest drive that we do for smallies. That's our main focus, and that pretty much will run. We'll start doing trips again in February, and we won't stop doing trips until Christmas. So January is pretty much the only month where we lose, time to fish because the rivers are choked with ice and whatnot. The only thing to do is really fish below dams. We don't do much of that, but it's a year-round thing. That if you really focus on one species and put your time in with that ours being smallmouth bass, you can get really good at that species. I used to jump around when I first started guiding because we had a late start to our bass season, which we talked about earlier. Last Saturday in May is a long time to sit around and wait if you're a fishing guide. So I jumped around, and it doesn't work if you want to do it at a high level.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And I know another thing that you guys are known for is really supporting the community and the resource. And 2 events that you're regularly involved with are the Huron River Single Fly and the Huckin for the Huron. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about those 2 events?
Yeah, so I've always, for a long time, I've worked with the Huron River Watershed Council, and that's our local watchdog over our rivers, our river here, and the tributaries and lakes that are part of it. So they're just an awesome organization. They're definitely a benchmark organization here in Michigan. Other watershed groups come to them for consulting and whatnot. They're just a really awesome organization. And back in the day, we started a couple of different things. We started first the Huron River single fly, which is a fairly small deal. It's just a one-day kind of fun gathering where guys meet at the shop and anglers go out and fish in two-person teams, and it's fairly inexpensive to get in it. I think it's like $50, and you get a membership to the Watershed Council, but it's a quick little fundraiser we do with them. And then the one that actually, raises a good amount of money is Huckin for the Huron. And that's where all of our guides donate a day. And, it's $1,000 an angler. And we go out and fish for the day and see how we do. It's, 5 fish over 16 inches, and whoever catches the most inches of fish wins. We have a big fish award and blah, blah, blah. But, the companies that I personally work with all sponsor it. So we got rods and reels and coolers and sunglasses and whatnot to give away for that one. And then the money that's raised for that event goes towards some sort of angling type improvement, whether it's signs that, just educate the public on the spawning behaviors of fish, or, the limits of fish and whatnot, or improving launches and put-ins and takeouts and whatnot. So Huron River Watershed Council, great organization. If you live within the watershed or you're here in Southern Michigan, look them up and become a member. It's truly a great organization to be working with, and good people to have on your side. So always down to help our local waters.
Absolutely. And I'll drop a link to them in the show notes for sure. And I can't let you go, Mike, without you sharing. I have to ask all of my guide guests the same question. The biggest misconception you think people have about the life of a fishing guide and a fly shop owner?
Well, fishing guide, they probably think that they get to fish all the time, but really they get to row all the time. And, we're not really, we've never really been that 8-hour a day, there's the takeout. We've been on the water exactly 8-hour guide service. So, their schedules are all over the place. We don't start at 8 and end at 4. Ever, we fish our schedule. Our fishing schedule revolves around current conditions and, the opportunity to put you on the best water at the best time. So, these guys are out fishing, 10, 11 hours with, between the time they pick up their client to the time they drop them off, 10, 11 hours. And then you got, an hour plus of prep before, and then an hour of cleanup. So not much time to sleep, not much time for family. And then if you want to grab a calculator, do the math on that, how much they make per hour, it's not much. So you're not going to get rich being a fly fishing guy. But what you're going to get rich with is just time spent outdoors and time spent with good people and whatnot. So, the guides, they work their butts off, and, I don't do a full season like I used to, but, it's a grind. It's a grind, a mental grind, a physical grind. And then a fly shop owner, you got to wear a lot of hats, So, I slowly, as the business has grown, I've been able to, hire a couple guys that help me manage the place. And, for a while there, I had a really small plate and a lot of stuff on it. And now I'm definitely a little bit broader in what I'm doing and being able to pick and choose where my focus goes. To best, help the shop grow and continue to succeed. But, just a lot of time, man, a lot of extra hours. We built this off of being available, so a lot of time communicating with customers in various forms, whether it's direct messages or emails or phone calls. And, I always joke, I'm on 20 hours a day. So, you get what you put in, and we tend to put in a lot of effort and a lot of work and, try to keep our customers happy. So it's just it's a never ending grind, but it's a fun grind. And, it's like anything in life. Doesn't matter what you're doing. If you're working hard, you're going to have a positive outcome more times than not.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you've already accomplished so much in your angling career. What would you like to accomplish before you hang your skates up in 20 or 25 years? Yeah,
I just, continue to grow the business. take care of my team. I want the guys to have a good life and, be able to afford homes and put their kids through school or whatever. So just keep grinding, make sure everyone on the squad and family's taken care of, and, expose my kids and to, the opportunities that I've had through fishing, whether it's going on destination trips and seeing the world that way or whatever, just keep seeing new stuff and meeting new people. And it's an experience, man. It's a ride. I don't want to get off it. I want to keep it going. People always ask me, what's your exit strategy? Well, of course I want to retire one day, but I could do this for a long time as long as I'm physically able and God's willing to keep me moving. I'm on it, man. I love it. There's not much. I don't ever see myself getting burned out with fishing. Just keep going, man. I don't really have any like crazy goals that I could share. I just take care of my crew and make sure everyone's comfortable and happy.
Yeah, no, and I know you really kind of that athlete's heart, right? You're always pushing yourself to get better, which is one of the reasons why you're not getting bored, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And as we kind of wind down, are there any projects you're working on or anything that's going on in the shop that you want to share with our listeners?
Well, we got some cool stuff coming up. Kind of had some choices to make going into 2020, and we are expanding the store again. So there'll be more on that come mid-January, but there'll be a new section to the shop opening up sometime probably middle of March, beginning of April. So that's something that we're focusing on and whatnot. And we've got a couple new team members that we're getting on board and getting them up to snuff and prepared for a big year in 2020. So not much besides the norm. We're always doing something, so it never really surprises anybody. It's like, oh, you guys are doing that. It's like, yeah, I figured you'd do that. But just keep going, man. Just keep going. It's I'm having a good time doing it, and the boys are too. And shop's going to get a little bit bigger. That's what I can tell you.
Well, that's great. And I know that you guys have an off-season educational program in the winter. I'll make sure to drop a link to that in the show notes. And how often do you have your beer ties?
Yeah, so Barflies is, I think, going into its 11th year. So Barflies is every Wednesday night. It's down at the Sidetracks. We have 2 classes going on at Sidetrack Bar and Grill, and then 1 class going on at the shop. So that's every Wednesday night, starting, I think, the 8th of January. And then we do a series called SO Dialed, and that is pretty much every Tuesday, at least 3 Tuesdays a month. And that is designed for the angler with a really busy schedule. It's short format. It's an hour and 15 minutes max. And what we did this year with that is we limited it to 15 people. So you got to sign up for it. It's $10 to sign up, but then when you show up, you complete the class, you get $20 in shop credit to use that night. So you're getting paid to learn. That particular, weekly event is simply a PowerPoint, presentation. You get a handout, and we're pretty much telling you how we approach said species or techniques or whatever, and pretty much give you the roadmap. It's your job to go use it and put it to work. Other things that we have coming up, you got Fly Fishing Film Tour at the end of February. Our 8th year anniversary event is the last day of February, first day of March. We'll roll that in the Michigan Fly Fishing Show, and then we'll have an event the first weekend in April, which will be announced in middle of January. So all kinds of cool stuff. We've got a really killer lineup for Barflies this year. Blaine's coming back up. We got Larry Dahlberg coming out of retirement to hit the vise. It's going to be an exciting year with that. Always innovating, always growing, always doing new cool stuff. So stay tuned. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on Facebook, SchultzOutfitters.com. So we're out there. We're doing it. We'll see you guys at the shows.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll drop as many links as I can put my hands on all those events into the show notes so people have an easy place to find them.
Heck yeah, man. I appreciate it. And, anybody out there that has any questions or anything, feel free to email me or DM me. We're always happy to share information and get you pointed in the right direction. If you have questions about gear or techniques or pretty much anything, we're always there to help. You'll get an answer pretty quick.
Well, I appreciate it, Schultz. I really appreciate you carving out an hour to talk with me during the busy holiday season.
Anytime, man. I appreciate you having me on, and look forward to doing it again.
Outstanding. Tight lines, everybody. Well, folks, I hope you liked that as much as we liked bringing it to you. Again, happy holidays and best wishes from everyone at the Articulate Fly for a happy and prosperous new year. Tight lines.